Hi, my name is Zalman Ainsworth. Thank you for joining another episode of APTV. Today I'm excited to have Chris Fifer, who's one of the creators and owners of Ultra Football. Ultra Football is everything soccer football, so you call it round football, with a 4,300 square meter store in Abbotsford, Melbourne, we're in now, and a 3,000 odd square meter store in Alexandria, Sydney. This is everything experience retail, and this is what differentiates in-store and online. Chris has over 40 years experience in retail. Chris has been in retail before I was even born. True story?
Yeah, I got to agree with that, yeah.
Yeah. And Chris is going to talk to us about where retail is going, what experience retail looks like, what customers are looking for, how online and retail works together. But as far as retailers go, there's no one with more experience that I've come across and who's created something that no one's seen before. I've read online on articles where Nike US has visited your store, Adidas has visited this store, who all both have big concepts in this space. And the media refers to this as the best soccer store in the world. And that's a massive, massive accomplishment. So congratulations, but thank you very much for doing this.
Thank you.
So your retail career spans to East Coast jeans.
I guess my serious retail career started at East Coast Jeans in the early 80s.
In the early 80s? What year in the 80s?
I think about 82.
I was born in 1982. It was a good year, wasn't it?
No.
Retail wasn't good in 82?
I don't think anyone was good in 82, and I think you demonstrate that.
Well, I disagree. It got better after that, though.
No, your arithmetic's got better. Yeah.
Okay, so what was your role in East Coast Jeans, which, by the way, still has a sign on Swanston Street?
Does it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was an accountant for them. I was a retail accountant for them, and not a very good accountant, but nevertheless, I had the shingle. And very quickly, I could. They were a mixture of franchisees and company-owned stores, and the franchisees, still a few would be still alive, I imagine, but they weren't all that clever, but they were driving European cars, and that got my attention.
Okay.
So I went to the owner, Denny Schwartz, and said, Denny, Denny and I had a very good relationship, and I said, look, would you mind would you consider me a good applicant to buy a franchise from you? And they said, yeah, why not? And I bought the Winter Garden franchise in Brisbane, so I moved to Brisbane.
Yeah. Mr. Schwartz was the first retail mentor you've had?
Outside my family, yeah.
Yeah? What did he teach you?
They were hard-nosed retailers, those guys, I tell you. Herbie and Denny Schwartz were very, very good. But it was probably, I think retail's very simple, and in those days, they made it sound simple, but the 3 R's were location, 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 if you like. That was very important to them, that when you go to a centre, the big task wasn't choosing the centre, it was making sure you got in the right part of the centre, and the stronger the brand was, the more it worked for them.
This is the 1980s, so how retailers were done. What were anything you learned back then you still use today?
I'm probably disciplined. I mean, we've got a location here that you're going to share with people that we've tended to hire non-retailers that have football passion, and we're trying to teach them how to retail. So there's a bit of work to be done there, and I think I lean on my experiences back then. Some say I'm harsh, but I'm not. I think retail's got
Seems like a nice guy.
Hell of a guy, but I'm fair.
Yeah.
But there's discipline. You have to have discipline. Yeah.
So from East Coast Jeans, that took you to.
So I was in Queensland, and I met a bunch of guys who had a very, very up and coming public company called Ariadne, who still survived. They were, I think, often unfairly treated by the press.
You're a true retailer. You use the word survival a lot, as if like, you know,
well, I think
there's only other way.
There's only, you can be 20 yards
down. A lot of success and profit too.
You can be 20 yards down the wrong street, and then what do you do then? Yeah, so I joined them, and they gave me, they were a firm heavily involved in acquisitions, and some of the acquisitions were for strategic purposes, and they had assets, mini corporations, if you like, that they weren't part of their mix, and they'd have people like me go and run them. So I had a stationary office equipment business to begin with, and over a period of time I moved into their corporate cotton farms, which were very big acreage out near Burke, out the west of New South Wales, and I moved into that, and I was very lucky because the price of cotton, only a few weeks after I took it over, doubled, and I did make some changes. I think I made some worthwhile and material changes to the operation. But
Right place, right time, though.
yeah, we went from $900,000 loss to a $2.7 million profit in our first year. So
Wow.
I often joke about that, but how they thought I was a farming guru. So then they said, well, you should run our New Guinea operation. And the New Guinea operation had copra and cocoa plantations and some cattle. They had about 5 when I arrived there. And they were big plantations, employed a couple of thousand guys, and they put me in charge of that. And within that was a big retail division as well, called Barley Corporation. So I made some good contacts there, and it was a very mature business. So it made.
This was a license they had with Puma.
They had the Puma agency as well as other agencies there, and I met a lot of guys. And it was more about there to get the product. You sold the product. I mean, they're very passionate about their sport in the island countries, and I guess I had good contacts there. But over a period of time, my time came to an end at Ariadne, and I was offered the role of CEO to come back to East Coast and become the CEO of East Coast. And that was probably I failed. I didn't do a very good job there. I mean, I did a good job in part, but I didn't achieve what I was asked to achieve, and so it disappointed me.
Did you learn more at your time at East Coast on the second batch, where you considered a failure, than you did on your first, where you were getting started?
I don't know if you can quantify it, but I think you always learn from mistakes.
Yeah.
If you don't learn from your mistakes, then
it's a waste.
You'll keep making them.
Have you ever seen a brand revived in your lifetime?
The brand had lost its way. So we did everything from refurbing the shops to restyling the product, all that sort of stuff, revamping the staff. We got some really good people into the stores. We took advantage of Jeans West's demise, and we hired in Queensland. We hired their whole team, and we had some good, well-trained. We ticked all the boxes.
Didn't work.
Well, we had growth and all this stuff, but it didn't work. No.
And how long till you kind of called it quits?
They called it quits.
Right.
On me, and that was okay. And look, it was an amicable, but I had no choice, and I think that it probably it weighed on me, but whilst that happened, the boys from Hong Kong looked me up and gave me the opportunity to evaluate their export business, their Puma export business in the South Pacific.
And all those island countries.
Yeah, they go from Tahiti. In that case, at that stage, they went from Tahiti to Tonga, if you like. They all went around the Pacific Islands, and they had an office full of people, and they were losing a lot of money, and they asked me to look at it, and I did.
And 30 years later, you're still involved. You're the Nike distributor for the island countries.
Yeah, I actually ended up taking on, after the Asian crisis, I took on the distributorship for Puma. I met Nike, and through that meeting, I guess, and that me sharing what I was doing, they offered me the gig of taking on Nike 24 years ago.
Wow.
And I do as far east as Tahiti, and I've gone as far west as Madagascar. I've even had Pakistan.
Have you been to all these countries?
Oh yeah, I had 18 trips I had 1 week in Seychelles every year for 18 years. It's been lovely.
Wow.
That's a beautiful island too.
Fast forward 2018, you open up your first Ultra Football store in Sydney, in Alexandria. Sorry, what is Ultra Football?
Well, Ultra Football, okay, well, if I give you the origins, that'll tell you
Please.
Yeah. So in around about we have 3 codes of football in the South Pacific that we service, being, two main codes: rugby union and football soccer. I call it football, but Australians call it soccer. And we had a lot of national teams, and we were buying teamwear product from Nike, and they took a decision, or made a decision, not to continue with it, not because they weren't selling it, but it required a lot of stock holding, and Nike don't like holding stock. They'd rather indent their ranges and so forth. They'd rather pre-sell, and that's their model. But they didn't tell me that they'd changed their mind. And I had quite a few national teams at that time. I don't have many now, but I did then.
In the South Islands.
In the South Pacific and the Indian Ocean. And what can happen there is very often the patron is quite high up in government, like the King of Tonga or the Prime Minister of Fiji and so forth. So I was mindful of the fact that I didn't want to disappoint them. So I said to Nike, there was a director there I knew quite well, and I said, what do I do? And he said, nothing I can do. And I said, well, who's doing it? He said, no one. This is teamwear. And I said, well, can I do it? And they said, yes. And so I took on teamwear. Nike
So that's custom-made jerseys for...
No, it's actually just blank jerseys generally, and then we get them customised by...
Customise the brand.
Yeah, now we didn't
teams.
customise them, but we had people that here we go with the model. We on-sold them to passionate football retailers who would then customise them. So we started this business in Australia, and we were doing really, really well in everywhere but New South Wales. And this is why Ultra was born. So we had a model that we were selling to passionate resellers, and they would customise the jerseys and sell to clubs, and everything worked fine. In New South Wales, we were getting very little traction at all. And we went to Nike and said, look, we think we have to develop our own passionate reseller, and we didn't have a name for it then. And they very, the word that I wouldn't say rudely, but it was almost rude. They said, with all due respect, we're probably better at you, and we can't make a football store work. We believe that for a football store to work, you have to have all brands, like all the main brands, Adidas, Puma, you name it. So they said, if you want us to support you in a retail store, you need to have all the brands. Wow. That wasn't easy. So they gave us a dozen stores around the world that we went to show us what they think was a good football store.
This is Nike USA or Nike Australia?
Nike Australia at this stage. Okay. And so we went to all these stores, and they came back with an idea, and then we found the location, and Ultra was born. And it was a lot, so much so the two stores we have are the two biggest in the world. And size doesn't mean that you're excellent, but it does give you the capacity to do things that are different. And that's where Ultra has a wonderful legacy, I think, for such a young company.
So how big are you in Sydney?
About 3,400 metres, I think. Wow. And 4,300 here. So
4,300 square metres in Abbotsford?
Yep.
And what do you have here?
Well, you'll show the film, but we've got, obviously, it's interaction, and it's football centric. We don't go to other codes or anything purposely. We were asked if we wanted to do rugby or AFL in Sydney. We said no. Yeah. This is a football culture. Ultra, people see the word as excellence, but it's not. Ultra football is based on the disenfranchised supporter base around the world that don't like corporate intervention, and they feel as though they're the passionate, original supporters of football, and they're anywhere from Eastern Europe, anywhere from the UK, South America. They've all got ultras. Even as you'd have to say that Melbourne Victory have their version of the ultras, and so we want a bit of an edge. We don't. We want to support them all the way through the process, if we can.
And there's enough of a depth in the Australian market for soccer to support these big concept stores?
Well, you're just talking to me after the Women's World Cup, and
yeah, but that was just the last couple of weeks. This is since 2018.
Yeah, sure, but I guess you could say that we made significant losses in our first 3 years, but that wasn't because the code wasn't there to support us. That was because we opened up what we call a destination location. And destination locations are different to what I was taught by the Schwartzes. In fact, they would never have done what I did, not in a million years, and they'd still be calling me nuts. But we don't think that, and we now know that our increases have been 30 to 40% every year on year in sales.
Right.
And if you think about that, on a low base, it's not hard to get a 40% increase. But now we're in high bases. Now we're talking about
And you're maintaining those sales growth.
Yeah, and over the World Cup period, we're up more than 100% during the World Cup period when retail in Australia is really struggling. Now we know the World Cup is a spike, but it's also a spike that we got people in our stores. Like I was in Sydney on the weekend, which benefited far more than Victoria did because of, I think, not having the rectangular pitches down here. Fifer are very strong, and they just said you can have some lead-up games and that's it. We had no finals. We had the best of 16, but that was about it. And in Sydney, the place was just full of people. Wow. And the sales were unbelievable.
Anyone who's in soccer comes in here and this is like the soccer Disneyland.
I don't think you can overstate the amazement of people that walk into this shop and go, wow. At either shop, they just walk in, they go.
I still can't get over it.